welcome to Reimagine version 14, our university edition. We've interviewed over 600 projects, teams, and thought leaders in the space, and the goal of our virtual conference is to educate and inform everyone, including those new to the crypto space, including longtime holders and industry professionals. So make sure you subscribe today to keep up to date with everything that's going on. And today we have returning with us once again, Mr. Anatoly Yakovenko, co-founder of Solana and CEO of Solana Labs. He has almost 2 decades of experience building high-performance operating systems, including leading OS development at Qualcomm, and he's held engineering roles at Dropbox and Mesosphere. Mr. Yakovenko has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Excited to have you back once again, Anatoly. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
And before we move into introducing the student panelists, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your early career before Solana, including how you got interested in blockchains and maybe why you founded Solana.
You know, like as an engineer working at Qualcomm for like majority of my life, like right around when Bitcoin kind of popped up, I was curious, you know, it was kind of thought it was like a neat thing. And I remember thinking about trying to build my own like GPU optimized miner and then like building hardware for ASICs and stuff. And before I got like too far down any one path, somebody already had built that thing. So I could see that the space was growing, but I was still kind of thought it was kind of a toy, kind of weird toy idea. And it wasn't really until 2017 that I got super interested in blockchain. And that came about as a kind of a realization that these systems, now that they're trying to scale to larger audiences, just weren't designed to how I would design them with my background and like wire, you know, like working at Qualcomm and being familiar with wireless protocols and like how those systems are designed. And you know, at that time, like Bitcoin was hitting like $60 per transaction. People stopped taking Bitcoin as for Bitcoin conferences. It was kind of like the meme, like the next future peer-to-peer payments doesn't really work. And I literally had like 2 coffees and a beer, and I had this eureka moment that there's a way to build a trustless source of time for passage of time. That high-level idea later became proof of history, and that was kind of like the first step towards building Solana.
Well, it is, yeah, that scalability is a huge problem, and yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as I mentioned before, this is our university edition, and our focus in this edition was to invite student blockchain partners to come ask questions and discuss groundbreaking new technologies with some of the most influential thought and business leaders in the industry. So in that vein, our company MouseBelt has been working with more than 80 blockchain organizations from universities spanning multiple continents, providing support in a variety of ways, from internships, office hours, sponsorships, and early stage projects investment. And today as well with me on my co-panel, I have joining us for our discussion, Glen and Ollie from the University of British Columbia and Julian from the University of Texas at Austin. Before we move on to the interview, I'm going to want you gentlemen, if you could, to tell us a little bit about your club, maybe your role, introduce yourself, maybe how many members and the distribution of the majors in your club, and maybe any events that y'all gotten into recently or have planned for the future. So yeah, let's go ahead and start with
yeah, sure. So
I'm sorry, Julian. Yeah, let's go ahead and start with UBC.
Sure.
That's okay.
Awesome. So my name is Glen. I'm the president and co-founder at UBC Blockchain Club. We started the club about 10 months ago in late 2021. A couple students decided that there's quite the high barriers to entry to the blockchain industry, and we wanted to provide that education and community to be that sort of in-route for students to get involved, learn more about the space, and make meaningful connections. So over the last 10 months, we've been scaling our club up. We're now about 500 members with a team of about 25. And our main focus this year is on developer education. So both semesters, we're teaching a 10 or 11-week course on blockchain development, ending those off with hackathons and demo days for students to showcase their learning. And we're also focusing on some social events, industry connections as well.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm Oliver. I'm one of the co-founders of Blockchain Club. I primarily manage partnerships, but I also work in smart contract security audits. I work for a firm called Zelic. We do a ton of Solana projects. Yes, and also a founder of YVR Dev, a community incubator here in Vancouver. So
Very interesting, very interesting. Thank you. And before I cut him off, also we had Julian in Austin.
Yeah, sure. So, Anatoly, I guess let me give a little background about myself. I'm originally from South Africa. I immigrated to UT Austin for college, and I got involved in the blockchain community there. As soon as I arrived, I was previously head of finance. I taught a lot of DeFi classes, bootstrapped to what Texas Blockchain is today. And now I'm in the role of head of expansion and trying to bridge the gap between all these bright students who are very innovative, but don't have the resources and the access to blockchain professionals and allowing to express what they have. So working with Solana very heavily. Yesterday, this is actually great timing. Yesterday, we had a Solana workshop. So Joe from the development DevRel team came over and kind of taught a lot of our students. And we have an upcoming hackathon called HackTex. And this is the first time Texas Blockchain has ever been involved. We're looking Solana is actually going to be the main sponsor for the event, providing network bounties. So really happy to kind of further this relationship. I'm also a university ambassador for Solana. So got great ties to what you guys do here. And thankful for what you guys have done for me. Looking at kind of where our club is at right now, we're sitting around, I would say 120 members, so not as much as a UBC yet. But our members are very dedicated from engineering and CS background. And we're starting to see a lot of shift now from people's mindsets around, hey, can I develop on Web 2? Or what's the new exciting opportunities on Web 3 and all these chains? So focusing a lot on education right now. We've got an engineering side as well as a finance side. And we're focusing on a lot of intro classes leading up to more in-depth smart contracts development classes. Looking to what else we host speaker panels, we host a conference next year, and very, very happy to be on here and excited to further the relationship between Texas Blockchain and Solana.
Thank you, Julian.
yeah, maybe before we proceed, Glenn, is there anything you want to tack onto that in terms of some of the stuff we're going to be doing in the winter with Solana?
Yeah. So we just agreed in agreement with the Solana Foundation to do a 10-week course on blockchain development, specifically to the Solana network. So we'll be teaching 1.5 hour course every week with some assigned readings as well for our students, with about 20 to 30 hours of material. Like I said, we just signed that partnership a couple weeks ago, and we're excited to do that. Going to our member composition, we're about 40%, 50% computer science students, 30% business finance students, and then the rest are dispersed.
Okay, well, let's move on to the questions. I think we're going to start with Texas, but when there's a natural lull in the conversation, we'll flip back over to UBC. But like I said before, this is a discussion, so don't hesitate, just naturally, if you got a question that follows on or, just something to say, I'll try and stay out of the way as much as possible. So let's go ahead, Julian, and start the questions.
Sure. So, Anatoly, not too long ago, my apologies for that. Not too long ago, you posted a tweet referencing Paul Graham's views on the hardest lessons for startups to learn, saying that every founder should read this once a month at least. Paul talks a lot about implementing features over time, iterating one's product, and in particular, he mentioned, if your product seems finished, there are two possible explanations. A, it is finished, or B, you lack imagination. Experience suggests B is 1,000 times more likely. So as a college student and inspiring founder myself, I struggle sometimes to focus on one vertical with all the ongoing innovation happening within the blockchain field. So what's your advice regarding this? How should new founders utilize all this innovation occurring while not losing focus on their product's needs and their specific vertical?
Yeah, this is always a conflict probably inside every founder, because you're trying to figure out, like, how do I grow my user base? How do I like expand? How do I add more features? But you're also trying to balance that with like actually discovering product market fit and getting that flywheel going. And that's really, really hard to balance. Honestly, like in some ways we got lucky. We never had enough funding to build too many features. So we had to optimize for the one key differential feature that made Solana interesting. And that meant like high performance, you know, basically consensus at the speed of light is kind of if you think of it. And that meant no EVM support. We didn't even have an explorer. The wallet was a command line. So it was really, really just like, here's like a thing that does fast consensus. And because of that, like one, we were launched ahead of our competitors. And two, we actually got lucky that we didn't have EVM support because we were able to build a local developer community that was very Rust focused. So that prevented a lot of like people copying Solidity over and like just relaunching, you know, yet another fork of Uniswap. So this is like, for founders, you know, like I think you should try to operate in that time frame where you only have 18 months to prove product market fit. Doesn't matter how much money you raise. Like, in fact, like having too much money, don't spend it. Like actually think, okay, if we only have 18 months, at the end of this, if we fail, we need to pivot and then use the rest of the money we have for that pivot.
That makes sense. Kind of cut ties.
Do you think there could be like pros to actually maybe being underfunded? Like, I kind of be interested to like kind of hear your story, how you meant to stick it through to see Solana to fruition when you were dealing with sort of funding issues.
Yeah, this is like kind of the story that I hear from a lot of folks anecdotally, is that a lot of companies that make it had to be in that over leveraged state where runway was running out. They had to cut corners, had to like make really, really hard decisions. And only through that kind of trial by fire that gave him the focus to execute. I don't know how you can, I want to believe that people are smart enough and strong enough to force themselves to go through that internally, but that requires like a really like a lot of willpower.
And also, I guess like one of the things we're seeing here is like passion in Web3 to bring you through those hard points, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this just takes a ton of discipline to kind of say to yourself, like, doesn't matter if you know, most startups don't have the luxury of raising too much, but you see that does not indicate success, even if you did. And like our competitors had like literally 5 to 10 times more cash on hand than us during like those 2 years. So that's not a signal that you're right about anything.
Yeah, like I think during those growth phases, it's important to stay hungry, right? So
all right, Glenn, did you have one maybe?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like since Solana's launched, there's been great adoption on the network, significant volume in like the NFT and DeFi space. And also we see some good integrations with large partners such as USDC Circle, really just because this network has the high performance, like you mentioned earlier. But going forward, how does Solana plan on competing with other layer ones and Ethereum with the rollups that are going to see the increased throughput and other comparable levels of performance to Solana? They plan on sort of approaching specific key verticals or integrating more real world partnerships?
We're actually like, so in terms of performance, Solana does more transactions per second than all the rollups, all the EVM chains combined, basically all the blockchains combined. So I've always asked this question, and it's like, what about a roadmap? How do we plan to compete on scale? It's actually pretty easy for us. The engineering is designed to leverage Moore's law and hardware. We've already shown that it works. And you look at every release and even the next release, the network is just faster and faster. And that's basically the plan. It's a plan that is pretty simple, but kind of maybe doesn't promise a magical solution that people can get inspired by, but like, it works and it's awesome. And it continues to be, to just make the network more reliable and faster. The second question is like, in terms of competition between ecosystems, there is, I think, like that's really, really hard for an ecosystem to actually like directionally compete. We don't really control who builds on Solana, why they choose Solana or whatever. Like we can help with messaging or like with documentation and stuff like that. But really people pick and choose for many different reasons. And every new ecosystem, like every 2 years, you're going to see new tech stacks come to market, and people will pick those simply because they're new. And that's awesome and fine. The key part for us though is do we still see awesome founders go, quit their jobs at Google and Facebook or whatever, and go build companies on Solana and get funding? And from everything we can tell, even despite the bear market, that's just like continuing to accelerate. Our last hackathon was bigger than all the other ones. And I don't even know why that's happening. But that's kind of like the key part. Like, I think that's more important than anything else. And there isn't like, I'm actually pretty skeptical of any big company or anything like that making crypto successful. And you can the reason for this is I think crypto requires like a mental shift for folks, like the internet. People just didn't understand what a URL was or what a website was. And it took literally 10 years for people to figure that out, because they had to learn that new user behavior. And there's no way like Walmart could have built Amazon, or like I don't know, the Library of Congress couldn't have built Google, like whatever your equivalents are. It's just it's really, really hard to shift an existing business and an existing consumer base to a new behavior. And you see that even with things like Instagram trying to introduce TikTok features. It's just like, that's a very small shift, like from my perspective. But like, try to convince Instagram users to store a seed phrase and figure out what self-custody is. It's just not going to happen. So this is just like going to be a very slow process and really unpredictable where the growth is going to come.
Is that maybe, I know we alluded to it a little bit before, and I think Walmart is still using COBOL as their database language, but maybe you could talk a little bit about what makes Solana different from other ecosystems, some more about that Moore's law and how it makes it special.
So we always basically, there was a lot of skepticism that even performance mattered when we started in building. People looked at Ethereum and said it was good enough, and that even the technologies that Ethereum is introducing is like rollups and things like that. You can think of them as like mini instances of Ethereum running EVM that do like 1 to 20 transactions per second. And you see that in the last 2 years, all the EVM chains that have launched basically hover around that kind of throughput. I always felt that was insufficient for real global adoption, that there's definitely room for a single giant blockchain, like a big fat blockchain that can handle a very large amount of throughput. Because when you start reducing fees and you start expanding how many concurrent users can interact with the state, just new use cases pop up, new unexpected use cases. Like order books and stuff like that, I thought were obvious, but I think the stuff that's less obvious are social networks and like all these other user behaviors with gaming and NFTs and things that require lots of concurrent users all doing things at the same time. And in my experience, like me as a gamer playing like Ultima Online and EverQuest and all these other games, like it's just more fun when there's more people in one server. That's just a fact. So if you kind of make that assumption that there's some use cases that work better in one giant big chain, then the only way to really build it is to make it this big bet on parallel execution, multi-core, like using multi-core architectures, like and maximizing throughput over that as much as we can. And that's something that myself and most of the folks that are Qualcomm have just kind of in our DNA. We saw mobile go through that process. We started literally with like these 16-bit 2 megabyte 2.5-inch screen phones, and within 10 years I was working on augmented reality and like a 64-bit 4 gigabyte device. And that's just 10 years in one field that was accelerated by demand. So if there's literally demand for crypto and we kind of get that massive adoption curve, the hardware and everything else will shift around it, and we'll see performance, I think, even accelerate faster than Moore's law, I would say. But even with Moore's law, we have so much throughput that we can get. You see like 10 gigabit connectivity rolled out to homes these days in the United States and around the world.
Yeah, it should be very exciting. Ali, I think.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to take it back to like Glen's question. He was asking about like Solana from like a transaction per second standpoint against like L1s and other rollups. And like I think some people like might have like a question. Like oftentimes people tend to have like a bit of a negative reaction to the fact that sometimes Solana has outages. And so like I was just wondering like if you could sort of like address that and like what your view on the state of that was.
Yeah, outages, this is like the hardest problem, I would say, for Solana. And like, first of all, you kind of have to think about like, what is the purpose of these blockchains? It's to be able to recover from any kind of catastrophic failure. So if those catastrophic failures may include bugs in the code that, like in Solana, have prevented consensus from moving forward, but could also mean like, you know, Yellowstone blows up and a bunch of computers blow up with it. The network, the only way that the network can recover from catastrophic failure is if at least one copy of the state survives these kinds of failures. So in the case of the Yellowstone blowing up, because Solana is geographically distributed across the world, there will be at least one copy of the ledger somewhere and we can recover from it. And these things are like really the foundation of what decentralization is. Like if you destroyed every copy of Bitcoin ledger, it's as simple as that. If you just went and did delete on all those copies, Bitcoin is gone. This like $500 billion asset goes away. So that's all it takes. It doesn't take a bunch of hash power. It just literally means we need to delete 12,000 computers or so. So this is why like all this stuff is important. And outages and congestion, these are kinds of catastrophic failures that the network can recover from. And we've seen the community basically like, okay, a bunch of nodes ran out of memory and more than a third of the nodes ran out of memory. We need to like patch whatever bug that caused it and then continue. So from a very like safety consideration, the network, the outages are a huge inconvenience for the users, for the applications, but never really threaten safety. So what sucks from an engineering perspective is that safety is almost like table stakes. You have to provide it anyways, otherwise, otherwise the network doesn't exist. So that because it's table stakes, reliability becomes the most important thing after that. And dealing with these issues is really, really tough because we are running a global network that's run by, not by Solana Labs or the foundation or anyone like that. It's actually run by third parties across the world, different environments. Some are like inside the Chinese firewall or whatever. So this is like, the software has to be perfect. And the software is written by humans, therefore it cannot be perfect. And the long-term, like real solution to this is actually having a separate team of people write also software from the ground up with different dependencies than the validator client built by Solana Labs. And this is called Fire Dancers, built by Jump, but they're high frequency trading team. So they're very familiar with dealing with very large data sets at very low latency. And because it's written by a separate team, once that client is live, the probability of the same bug existing in both is virtually zero. And that really will improve the reliability across the board, not just for safety, but also for just uptime. Because as soon as, if you see that one client has memory issues or something like that, you can basically fail over to the second client and things like that.
Let's go ahead and throw it right on back to Julian. I know we have just a little bit of time left. Let's go ahead and throw it back to Julian.
Yeah, sure. So kind of, I'm going to now address kind of the crypto carbon markets and kind of the whole ESG view. So the Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute recently published a report indicating that Solana emits around 935 tons of CO2 annually, which in comparison to Polkadot or Tezos is 28x and 17x their yearly network emissions respectively. So my question is, what initiatives is Solana undertaking to become a carbon neutral blockchain or even a carbon negative blockchain? Other players such as Polygon are going as far as creating climate offset verticals within their ecosystem and have even pledged $20 million to a series of community initiatives. So is Solana taking the same approach? Are they looking at focusing on project developers, sequestering CO2 and partnering up with them? What is the kind of plan ahead for that?
Yeah, Solana it buys carbon offsets to offset its carbon emissions, the foundation does. So it is carbon negative from that perspective. And when you look at the number of transactions that Solana handles, from applications and from users, the energy cost per transaction is lower than those other networks. So it is far more efficient. The network uses as a whole more energy, but it serves many more users and many more use cases. So a single Solana transaction does about like the worst kind of, from like, you try to have the most conservative analysis per transaction, it's about 3 Google searches. So if you use Google 3 times a day, that's equivalent to sending 1 Solana transaction. And no one really thinks of Google, like their usage of Google, as being the main energy like expenditure in their life. So I think because of our design, we're able to handle so much more throughput and therefore provide so much more efficiency for crypto. I think we're like one of the greenest blockchains for developers and applications to deploy and build. But even despite that, the foundation buys offsets to get it down to 0. And the cost of those is like basically so low that it's not like a significant amount of capital or anything like that.
Well, that's the whole idea. Just to give you context, I'm working on a project to bridge these carbon credits on chain, offer regenerative finance all around that. And I do plan to launch on Solana and the likes.
Awesome.
But just looking at kind of your ideas around that, I would love to get your thoughts on kind of all these new innovations coming. You've seen Token Protocol on Polygon, you've seen KlimaDAO. I'd just love to get your whole idea on where that sort of vertical is going and kind of where you see it playing a major role in offsetting climate.
I think there's a lot of work in carbon offsets that could be done just to create higher quality offsets. People, I think, that don't have a lot of depth in understanding how the carbon offset market works don't realize that it's basically like anyone can say, I have some carbon offsets. And
how do you verify that?
Yeah, there's no like there's no real awesome strong standards on verifying them or making sure that they haven't been double sold or double counted.
Definitely.
And there's a lot of things that I think blockchain technologies could do to improve on the transparency of it, but it can't be done solely on chain because these are physical external assets. So that needs actually support from like local like governance infrastructure and stuff like that as well.
I totally agree, and I think it's awesome if you could pivot off those verifications, now bringing on the blockchain, verifying that. I think that's such a cool use case. Even looking at a small use case such as a burn mechanism, trying to avoid the double spending. I think it just has great market fit.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the way that we get there is by making the most efficient blockchain that we possibly can, right? Sure. We want to thank Mr. Yakovenko, the co-founder of Solana and the CEO of Solana Labs, for joining our roundtable today. And also I would like to thank Glen Ollie out at the University of British Columbia, as well as Julian down at the University of Texas. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for coming out today. Even though
thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Have a great one, y'all.